Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 31st of August 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox at cynicalbrit.com, that is mailbox at cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. And the game in the background is once again Singularity. Said I'd play a little bit more of that. It's not a bad shooter, it's just incredibly linear and very much consolified game, which is kind of unfortunate, but hey. We'll go with it for the time being. The first email comes in from Ahaz that says, through all of the things that EA was doing to Battlefield 3, it came to my attention of what they're actually doing, and that was making BF3 piracy-proof, such as needing Origin to play, could be so that EA could keep track of all the registered copies, no mod support to keep the game from being open, etc. While I'm not sure if they're going to succeed, probably not, it just surprises me how inconvenient this is to the consumer base, and come to think of it, every kind of DRM is not exactly a strong selling point to consumers. Does a game have to be open to piracy in order for it to be consumer-friendly? Sort of, yes. Here's the thing. Piracy is going to happen regardless, and this is why this is a dumb thing to do. When you continually cause problems for your legitimate customers, you push them towards piracy, because piracy is quite easy. And when a company annoys you, when a company does something that is blatantly seen as anti-consumer, then people get into their heads that it's okay to pirate. And of course, that's not the case, but it's a justification in their mind, which is all they really needed to push them to that point. And then, of course, they suddenly realize that, hey, this whole getting new games for free thing is actually kind of neat, and they're going to do it more, and then you've just lost someone who was putting money into it. It's a stupid thing to do. If you have some kind of DRM-based system, then you better damn well make sure it adds value. There is an example, and it is called Steam. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't personally like to use Steam for all my stuff. I use Gamersgate as my primary source of games. I will buy on Steam if it's on sale, or if it is available nowhere else. It's not to say I will not use Steam, that's ridiculous. I've got about 400 games on Steam. But I will avoid using Steam when I have the option to do so, because personally I dislike the use of the client. I like the traditional method of installing and uninstalling, and not having to run a client in the process, and not having to worry whether or not my game is going to run when I'm on the train. And I travel a lot these days, so to me it makes sense to try and avoid Steam whenever possible, because the offline mode is not 100% reliable. That and the fact that you have to set it into offline mode before you leave, and if I forget to do that, then I'm kind of screwed and I can't play certain games. That and certain Steamworks games simply will not run without the internet, blah blah blah. Not that that's going to help if I buy it from anywhere else, but hey. The point of the matter is that Steam adds value because the client and the fact that it is in a collection of games that are easy to access is a big plus for a lot of people. As is, say, the in-game Steam interface, the Friends interface. All of their friends are already on Steam, so if they can get their games on Steam, they will. If something's got Steamworks DRM, for instance, they're okay with that, because you have to admit, some added value there. Personally, I couldn't care less for the added value. I'm offline pretty much all the time on my friends list on that. I don't use Steam to contact friends. I use Ventrilo. So, as far as I'm concerned, that added value is completely irrelevant. But I am only one person, and there are plenty others who do, in fact, find value in that. And I can certainly see the value of having a large collection on one platform that's easy to access. There really isn't anything wrong with that. Back in the day, DRM used to be fun. Do you remember the one from Monkey Island, the whole Match the Pirate thing? Yeah, that was pretty neat. Unfortunately, now that everything's gone digital, you really can't do stuff like that anymore. Good solid use of DRM, for instance, would be find this word on this paragraph of the manual. Unfortunately, if you lost the manual, you would be in a lot of trouble, but you get the idea. Those kind of DRM systems worked quite well back in the day, but cannot work any longer. If they're looking for a technology-based solution, then the chances are they will fail, because at the end of the day, there are an awful lot more cracking groups than there are people making DRM solutions. And as we have seen time and again, these cracking groups are extremely talented and very tenacious. They compete with each other to try and get things out first. You can't really beat a scene like that. It's just not possible. What you can do is encourage your customers to buy it legitimately by offering them rewards for doing so. Free copies of old games is usually a really good way of doing it, or credit towards future games. Trying to get people back into the whole retail chain, for instance, the idea of buying games, because buying stuff is quite a pleasurable thing. if you get cool bonuses like, pre-order this now and get a free copy of this game to play immediately. People will actually do that. That's a reasonable form of pre-order bonus as far as I'm concerned, as opposed to exclusive content that is locked away from everyone else. That's the kind of thing they need to do, and they need to try and make access as open as humanly possible. Sure, put some basic checks in there. Nobody really minds about CD keys and stuff like that. But beyond that, just stop, because it doesn't work. Regardless of what Ubisoft will say, it does not work, it annoys people, it drives them towards piracy, and it perpetuates this horrible, vicious circle that we've got going on in PC gaming, where companies say nobody buys games on PC, they all pirate it, and then everyone else says, well, it's because you put shoddy PC ports onto the PC, and you don't care about your consumers, and that's why we pirate it. And it goes around and around and around, and it's horrible, and both sides need to just grow the hell up. This one comes in from Brad that says, it's no secret that lots, and I mean lots of games lately have been getting October and November release dates, and my question is why? It seems incredibly illogical to release so many different games within a few days of each other, especially when many of the titles are very high profile. It seems to me like the people behind these games are forgetting that some people don't have the money or time to buy all of these games when they release. They end up choosing one over the other. For example, Skyrim comes out on November the 11th, and Assassin's Creed Revelations comes out November the 15th. Of course, both games have very lengthy campaigns, so it seems like both developers will lose sales from this. What baffles me even more, though, is how some smaller games are being released during this time period as well. Lord of the Rings War in the North is coming out on November 1st, the same day as Uncharted 3. I think we all know what game the majority of people will be buying when that day comes. I'm very interested in the reasoning behind this, and would love to hear your thoughts. Well, for one thing, I'll certainly be buying War in the North, because that's actually going to be on PC, whereas Uncharted 3 won't be, and War in the North looks really badass. It's not that outlandish, considering that Uncharted 3 is a single-format release, and War in the North will be on multi-format, so they can still get sales on 360 and PC, so they're probably not all that worried about that. It's mostly because it's quite close to the holiday season. It's as simple as that. It's around Black Friday. It's around the time when people save up money. It's around the time when people get Christmas bonuses. And, of course, it's around the time when Christmas comes. So that's when the majority of your sales are going to happen at full price. It's as simple as that. There are a couple of games, actually, that really should not be coming out in November. Examples, Twisted Metal, for instance. As much as I'm going to love that game, it's going to get absolutely bloody stomped in its current October-November-ish release date. Saints Row the Third might do well. I mean, there's a lot of advertisement going on around that. You did mention War in the North. There's also going to be a port of The Witcher 2 coming out around November for Xbox 360. Oh, dear. Yes, that might not work out so well at all. Then, of course, you've got to deal with Modern Warfare 3, so pretty much no shooter wants to come out around that time, and one can hardly blame them, except apparently for the remake of Halo Combat Evolved, which is supposedly aiming at the middle of November, if you can actually figure that one out. Oh, man, it is such a mess, honestly, and I think it's now getting to the point where this is just silly. And the reason I believe it's just silly is because there are just too many games now. This might have worked 5-10 years ago. I don't think it works so well anymore, and I'm thinking an awful lot of games actually suffer a huge amount as a direct result of them launching in that October-November window. The thing is, I don't know as much as the publishers do. That is absolutely 110% certain. I don't. Why would I know as much as those guys do? They have the analytics required. They have marketing teams that know about this kind of stuff. If they were repeatedly seeing games fall flat on their face as a direct result of this, then they probably wouldn't be doing it as much as they currently are. So evidently people are still buying them in sufficient numbers in order to make it worthwhile. I guess the whole Christmas release thing is actually so potent within Western territories that any kind of problems that would be caused by oversaturation are overridden simply because of the amount of money that gets spent in that period. I suppose to some degree it also helps from a work standpoint, say, with the development houses, whereby you've got a game wrapping up and releasing in November, so the studio is not going into crunch time around Christmas and things like that for a early January release or some other nonsense, and some of the January releases are actually happening, but I'd imagine that the studio would want to get things wrapped up before that, and the publisher probably wants their development house to do that as well, because working over Christmas, of course, ends up costing them more money with things like overtime and holiday pay around that period, all sorts of nonsense, and most likely the studios are probably not all that interested in working around that time, and the actual coders, developers, programmers, art guys, they would rather be home with their families and not working in an office. Honestly, that's the best I can come up with. I did have a look around and see if there were any other reasons, but there don't seem to be any that are readily available. That's the kind of thing that you would have to actually ask one of the big publishers who are responsible for this kind of thing in the first place. Why do you keep doing this to us? I have no idea. In particular, it doesn't make sense with games that are supposedly aimed at adults, when you've got adults that can effectively buy games whenever they please and are not necessarily going to get video games for Christmas, because of course they want them on release date. Why would you release it around that time? I can understand Modern Warfare 3, because that's primarily aimed at 11-year-olds, but aside from that, why does it make any sense? Oh, I can just hear the mad typing now. It is delicious. And to cap off, we've got a quick one here from Alex that says, I was reading on the Terra Online website that they'll be implementing a system similar to Plex in EVE Online. Is this something that's a major selling point, and more games should look into something like this, or is it just a gimmicky sort of thing? Well, Plex makes sense in the EVE universe, and what is Plex, folks? Plex is the pilot license extension, and what that allows you to do is turn 30 days of playtime into a purchasable in-game asset. So you buy it outside of the game, you convert it to something in-game, and then it can be traded to somebody else for some kind of in-game resource. In the case of EVE, there is a big market for Plex, and it generally maintains roughly around the same kind of price, unless, of course, there's a big influx in the market. The thing about EVE is that most of the market, in fact, almost all of it, is pretty much player-generated, and it is a full interconnected and interdependent player-run economy. Terra Online, on the other hand, probably isn't. So what ends up happening is if you have a lot of Plex, let's say, put into Terra Online, then you get what's called mudflation, because there is money being generated out of seemingly nothing. For example, for your average player, let's just take your average player, a lot of money is made by mining, and mining is a finite thing. There are a finite number of mineable resources within the universe at any given time. Sure, it's a freaking lot of them, but it is finite. And as a direct result, the simple generation of cash from thin air generally doesn't happen as much as say, a game like WoW. So, sure, it does happen. There's no real doubt about that. Running missions effectively generates cash from thin air, for instance, since it spawns an instance in which to fight. But it is way, way less than World of Warcraft. What Plex is in a game like, say, Terra Online is effectively a legitimized gold buying service whereby you can purchase a Plex for real money, then sell it to someone in-game in order to generate gold. And outside of EVE Online, I really do not approve of this. Buying gold is basically buying power in a game like that. It really is as simple as that, especially in the early stages of it. This was the case in early WoW, whereby with gold and with purchased gold, you could purchase some of the most powerful weapons and armor in the game. As the game continued to advance, that kind of phased out because most of the really powerful gear was, of course, BOP, and you had to get it from a dungeon, and that was a really good idea from Blizzard in order to reduce the amount of gold farming and gold buying that was going on, but it still happened for whatever reason. And with Terra Online, when it launches, I would imagine there'll be similar problems with it. That said, I think, sadly, gold farming has gotten to the point where it is so hard to combat, the games are having to put this system in order to give people a legitimate way of doing what they were going to do anyway. It's sad that it's gotten to that point, isn't it? People would rather just buy their way to power than actually earn it. I think there are plenty of games that do bring this nonsense on themselves, honestly, by making the earning of gold not a pleasurable activity, but simply a chore, a treadmill, a grind. That's the kind of thing they need to work to eliminate, because, of course, if earning money is really fun, then people will be more inclined to go out and actually do it that way, as opposed to simply buying it. That sounds like a reasonable idea, and I think perhaps people should be considering that as a priority in the development of their future MMO titles. Okay, folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox, and remember to email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. I'll see you next time.